Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode here on the 5571 podcast. My name is Danny, and for those that don't know, this is a podcast all about what's new and what's happening at the Disneyland Resort. This week, we have quite a bit of news actually to talk about first before our Main Street topic. I wanted to get right into something we didn't mention last time, which was a new president for the Disneyland Resort. We usually, in the past, back as early as I can remember from like 2005 with Matt Ouimet and then Ed Greer and all those other presidents back then, it was typical to see a cadence of a new president at Disneyland Resort every 3 years. And we haven't really had that recently. Of course, Ken Potrock was our Disneyland Resort president through the pandemic. And it kind of would have been weird, I think, to kind of switch around that during that time frame. We had Rebecca step down at the beginning of the pandemic, kind of right as things shut down. Ken Potrock took over. And then he kind of stayed with us through that all. So we saw, of course, right before that, Josh D'Amaro, and then now in his new current role. But we got a brand new president for the Disneyland Resort. Ken Potrock's going to be leaving, and he's actually going to a new role that was created for him. And he's going to be the president of the Walt Disney Company Major Events Integration. Don't know what that is. I don't know what major events would be. The only thing I could think of is the Olympics, but then I think, hey, that's Universal NBC, so not necessarily Disney tied, but because it is going to be here in Los Angeles, maybe there will be some sort of tie. Not sure. However, we do have a new president, and his name is Thomas Mazloum, and he's currently the president of Disney Signature Experiences. So you might be wondering, what is Disney Signature Experiences? Well, that would be things like Disney Cruise Line, Disney Vacation Club, Aulani, Adventures by Disney, the National Geographic Expeditions, and then of course Story Living, which is going to be that new resort over in Palm Springs that they're working on right now in like the Coachella area / part of California. So basically like all the signature high-end things that you could do, that was his last role, or where he was last with the company. So bringing his expertise on those higher end things to the Design Resort, it could be a huge focus as Disneyland tries to transition into a bigger destination than what it is, with Disneyland Forward approvals now underway, potential expansions beyond just what we heard at D23. We don't even know what's going into any of the new spaces that they've been approved for, whether it's the Simba parking lot, the other parking lots on the other side, or even the Toy Story parking lot. His experience could definitely bring a lot of insight and relevant thought processes behind all of this, as far as bringing a more signature experience, a more destination-like experience to Disneyland Resort. So I say it's all a good thing, and I'm excited to see kind of what he brings moving forward through all these changes. I'm excited for big changes at Disneyland. I think some huge things need to happen in order to kind of move us forward into a different style of resort, and maybe he's the one to do it, or at least usher in the beginning of that. And maybe he's the beginning too of a more typical ongoing cadence of Disneyland Resort presidents, where we have someone every 3 years. So we'll have to see. Does his cadence or his stay only last 3 years, or does he go a little bit longer like Ken Potrock did? But again, his name is Thomas Mazloum, is our new Disneyland Resort president. Next up, I wanted to talk about some of the closures and different refurbishments that we have at Disneyland. We talk about that a lot on this show, but I wanted to bring some updates on some of them. So the way it's kind of worked lately with, renovations and different closures at Disneyland, it's kind of based off of the published calendar that's on the Disneyland website and also on the Disneyland app. When you click each day and like for the hours of operations, when you're trying to go to the park that day or see maybe when major entertainment's going to be, you'll see what rides or attractions are listed as like closed for refurbishment. And so you can click forward on all the different months, and then once those attractions are no longer listed as on refurbishment, you can get an idea of like when they might be coming back. So lately, when we see things are going down for refurbishment, we have to put out the clause or like the caveat that all these things are going down with an indefinite date in mind. There's no date like set currently at this time, because we don't have the ability to kind of like know exactly when those closures are going to be and when they're going to come back. In the past, Disney would share that information with like cast members in their little daily guides that they would give out each day and have them share with guests. Oh, Matterhorn's going to be closed from this time to this time, and it's going to be back up. But I think they don't like to stick to those dates specifically, and they like it to be, not printed somewhere, right? If it's somewhere listed or posted somewhere, then Disney has to like abide by that, and it can't necessarily be like subject to change as much as they want. It might be, cause some guest concerns if people have been told, hey, Matterhorn's supposed to open on this day, and then they come and it's not open yet because they had a little bit of a delay for whatever reason, and it's got to stay closed for one more week. So I think this removes the liability a little bit on that and allows them to have more flexibility on things changing last minute, as they so often do nowadays. But we do have some updates on some of the things that we mentioned. So we know right now that the Disneyland monorail and the Disneyland Railroad are closed currently for refurbishment. We knew they were going to be coming back up sometime in spring, but we didn't know when. And now we have a date for both of those, because it could have been all the way up until the kickoff, right, of the 70th anniversary celebration, but we just didn't know. But now we know that the monorail and the Disneyland Railroad will be returning to operation on March the 7th. So the monorail was closed primarily to add the new turnstiles over at the downtown Disney entrance. So those new ticket turnstiles that we're seeing installed in the front entrance of both parks, they're now going to be at the front entrance of the monorail. So that's the primary reason as to why that's closed right now. And you can see that construction work being done on now with walls around the station there, and no real visible work being done on the monorail. I'm sure the monorails themselves maybe are getting a little bit of refurbishment, some cleaning potentially, and who knows, maybe even some really cool wrapped monorails that are going to debut soon for the 70th anniversary. That's the hope, right? Fingers crossed on that. And then the Disneyland Railroad, its purpose of closure was more to replace large sections of track. So they were replacing like the cement and like large portions of track on different areas throughout the railroad's track area. So we saw some of this happening on Main Street train station area, and then also beyond that, kind of towards Frontierland. So a lot of work in that general direction. That's the reason for its closure, but it looks like they're going to be able to wrap up both and bring them back at the same time. Now, new closures that we didn't know about were Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. Now, this attraction does go down pretty regularly, at least on an annual basis, for maintenance on like elevator cables and things like that, right? The cables have to be replaced eventually. They can break or snap, and it's not like a detriment or a devastation if it does. They just need to be replaced regularly and maintained, and I feel like that's probably the time for some of them. I know lately we've seen some kind of some low shaft operation. They got 3 shafts on that ride, and I think lately we're only seeing like 1 shaft operate most of the time, which really makes the line a lot slower, especially when you're adding in things like the lightning lane. So the more maintenance they can do and keep the ride closed for a couple weeks to bring back all 3 shafts is definitely a better thing for all people involved, not only the cast members but the guests too. This is going to be closed just after the train and the monorail reopen, so they'll be closed starting March the 10th. And it's only going to be closed for like 2 weeks or less, so it's a really short closure. I think it comes back on like the 16th, so not even a full 2 weeks, or not even a full week, maybe. I'm not even. It's showing hours on, according to Scott Gustin on Twitter, it's showing hours on March 16th, so maybe not even a full like week. It's maybe just a week, but we know it's going to be closed starting March 10th. And again, we kind of just have to check the calendar on a day by day basis to see when it comes back, because they don't like list anything. Now, sometimes Disney does share specifically a closure that's going to happen, like they did with with the Haunted Mansion when they were working on stuff, and they kind of give us a little bit of a time frame, and that's usually done through like media heads and like news outlets that they decide to share the information with. But in this particular instance, it just seems like a more routine maintenance on the Guardians of the Galaxy. This is another closure that I wanted to talk about that we've already talked about here, but it's just worth mentioning since it's happening this week and it's relevant. So starting on Saturday, February the 8th, the Red Car Street Trolley in Buena Vista Street in Hollywoodland will be closed permanently. This attraction will have its final day of operation again on Saturday, February the 8th, which is also simultaneously Disney California Adventure's birthday. So there's already been long lines for this attraction throughout this last week, and I'm sure this week that will continue. They've even set up extended queues for it on Buena Vista Street as you walk into the park for guests that want to queue up and wait to ride it one last time. I'll definitely be doing that this week. I might even be doing it on Friday in the rain when we're supposed to have rain scheduled forecasted for Disney California Adventure and Disneyland Resort in general. But the last day again will be Saturday. Disney did share through some of their media heads that the attraction's vehicle, the trolley, would remain parked on Buena Vista Street afterward for, photo purposes and just, general like theming and props kind of thing. The only thing I don't know is whether or not they're going to be modifying them in any way, whether or not we'll be able to stand inside of them to take photos, or if it's just going to be like it's closed up and then you can take photos in front of it kind of situation. The Buena Vista Street trolley station has a wireless charger, and the vehicle itself has batteries and is battery operated. So, I know, they always tell us as consumers that storing lithium ion batteries are kind of a dangerous thing, especially if they're not being used and they're just sitting there. So I would imagine if they plan to leave it long term just sitting there, we would probably want to remove the batteries from the trolley so they're not sitting there and potentially causing a fire hazard down the line in that trolley as it sits there. But who knows, maybe they get to a point where they could ever bring the trolley back at some point to some sort of operation. But from what I'm hearing now, just as rumors, it sounds like the trolley with the orange striping is already gone, and the only one that's been running is the red one, the solid red one, because there were two different trolleys that marked two different eras of the streetcar trolley in Los Angeles, and the solid red one's the one that we have still. So whether or not that stays the same through the end of the whole thing, we'll have to wait and see. But if you are excited about, riding it one last time, make sure you do it this week. There is rain forecasted for the end of the week, but right now at least it's looking clear for Saturday, which is its final day. So make sure you head on over to DCA if that's what you'd like to do. In more news coming to Disneyland Resort, the Pixar Putt is making its way back over here. It started in Anaheim first on its little tour over at the D23 Expo, or just the D23 event that we had this last year. It debuted. Now, I didn't get a chance to do it there. I know some of my friends did, like Peter and Kitra from Ordinary Adventures. They had experienced it. And then, of course, it went on tour to a bunch of different places all over the country. More recently, it came back to Long Beach, and it's finally making its way back to Anaheim at the Disneyland Resort. It will be stationed at the Pixar Place Hotel here at the Disneyland Resort. It's open to all guests. It's not just open to hotel guests. You need to book a tea time, right? A tea time, since it is a golfing experience. And your tea times will have a per person cost. So I think it was $33 for a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday tea time. And then it was $27 for a Monday through Thursday tea time. Now, they do indicate that parking would be taking place in the Simba parking lot, and then you would head on over to the hotel. So they don't really have a lot of parking there for hotel guests. There is like a small parking structure attached to the hotel, but I think they'd like to keep that open for guests that are actually staying there, and not guests that are just coming for the golf. So they're going to be directing everyone towards the Simba parking lot, which is the same parking lot that you would go to if you're going to visit Downtown Disney. So if you want to just Google Downtown Disney parking, you'll probably be able to get to the Simba parking lot and no issues. Keep in mind, the Simba parking lot has an hourly rate, and they only validate at Downtown Disney locations. I'm not sure if Disney's going to be validating for downtown Disney at this location. They may or may not be. My guess is they probably won't be. But you can make it sort of a day, right? If you want to come to do the golf and then maybe head on over to downtown Disney to do some shopping and some dining, as long as you spend $20 or really any kind of money in downtown Disney, the location will validate for you and you'll get some parking for a few hours for that $10 rate. If you plan on staying a little bit longer and you want to kind of make more of a full day out of it, I'd probably recommend just going to the Mickey and Friends or Pixar Pals parking structures, pay that $35 rate or use your annual pass and park all day, and then just walk on over to the Pixar Place Hotel to do the experience. My guess is it's going to be located on the outdoor kind of pool deck area. They have a lot of open space up there. They do use it for events and other activities. They've been doing a Bing Bong meet and greet out there. There's a lot of space for them to kind of sprawl out and use that for the Pixar Putt golf experience. And that's going to be located on the third floor of the hotel. So if you're like lost and don't know where to go, I'm sure there'll be lots of signage, but their pool area is not on the first floor. It's actually on the third floor on a really cool deck that kind of overlooks some parts of downtown Disney. So if you haven't been to that part of the hotel before, this is a great way to experience that too and see maybe some new things you haven't before. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about not necessarily a ride closure or anything, but more specifically something that's been the big buzz, I guess, this week from a lot of people, which is Star Wars Rise of the Resistance. The attraction actually had a major show experience or show element that was repaired and is now working again, which a lot of people have been super, super happy about. And that is the cannons segment just after you have had your run-in with Kylo Ren and he kind of tries to battle you with his lightsaber. You head into the room with the big cannons that are shooting out of the destroyer ship at the other, rebellion ships or resistance ships that are there in the distance. So it's a really kind of fun element because you're in an escape pod, right? Trying to get away, and you've made it through parts of the spaceship you're not supposed to be. And this brings a little bit of believability to that when you're trying to like dodge and weave in this cannon room that you're clearly not supposed to be in from these large cannons that are, rocking back and forth after, shooting their lasers. Now the element itself has been broken for quite a while. You would come into this room and they would just not shoot, and they were just sitting there kind of static, and it wasn't really kind of a fun experience anymore for the storyline of it all, the element of surprise. But now that's back and it's working, and it seems to be working great. So hopefully it sticks this way. Hopefully they can fix it on both sides, and then it just kind of remains fixed. But we'll have to see. Maybe this is a really complex element and show experience that can potentially break again in the future. But at least it's good to know that they're trying to get it back up and operational, and they're not just leaving it kind of once it's broken, we're never going to touch it again kind of thing. It's nice to know that they've spent the money to actually repair it and fix it. So if you haven't experienced Star Wars Rise of the Resistance in a long time, maybe there's a chance you've never even seen this working correctly. It had been not working for quite a while. So if you want to go on it again, you might experience something new you hadn't before when you reach this scene just after your encounter with Kylo Ren the first time. But I wanted to talk about kind of just some upcoming planning. People are trying to plan their trips for 2025 and kind of see what they can expect when they're visiting. There's quite a few things on the horizon, in addition to just Disneyland's 70th anniversary. There are, a few things already in place right now, like the Lunar New Year Festival, which is actually going to be ending in just about 10 days on February the 16th. But there's a few things coming up that are on the horizon for the Design Resort, which is going to be a crazy one that people aren't expecting as quickly as it's going to be here. So as soon as we see the Lunar New Year Festival end on the 16th, the Food and Wine Festival at Disney California Adventure Park actually starts just after on February 28th. I think that's the earliest it's ever started. I don't know that it's started in the month of February before. It's going to be February 28th through April 21st, so quite a long run for the Food and Wine Festival. And during that same period, we'll also see the Star Wars Season of the Force over at Disneyland, which will be taking place March 28th, so a whole month after the Food and Wine Festival kicks off through May 11th. And of course, that celebration will end right up against the Disneyland 70th anniversary. But with the Food and Wine Festival, starting in February, it's going to be quite a unique experience for guests that are traveling there to be able to have and do that experience much sooner than they would have beforehand. And also, don't forget, some of those bookable experiences are already available, and that's kind of one of the main reasons I wanted to bring it up on the podcast. I did that in previous episodes, and like last year when we had the Food and Wine Festival, I love doing those signature bookable experiences where they have like the wine and spirits classes, they have the cocktail or mixology classes. So those are actually available now, and I think a lot of them have sold out. I myself am doing one again, maybe towards a little bit more towards the beginning of or I guess more of the middle of the event. I'll be doing one. So not right away when it starts, just because the ones that were available at the beginning weren't exactly the ones that I wanted to do. So it's going to be, I think in April. The beginning of April is when I'm doing one of those bookable experiences, but they have the Carthay Circle receptions already live and bookable. They have some of the hotel experiences live and bookable. And then, of course, the beverage education and mixology seminars like the ones I've done. All you have to do is literally just search for the Food and Wine Festival on the Disneyland website, or you can even Google the California Food and Wine Festival Disneyland, and it's going to be the first thing that pops up is the page for the Food and Wine Festival. And on the page, you'll see the first option be bookable experiences. And there's quite a few things to book, and they're all listed and available now. So, and they are still the same price as they were last year, just $25. So truly, I think a bargain for what you get. You get like a little bit over an hour of experience. You get to make a cocktail drink, or, be part of a beverage and spirits seminar to learn more about maybe your favorite liquor. And you can, spend about an hour and a half kind of immersed in that and experiencing it at the same time. I think for $25, it's a pretty good price for a signature experience at Disneyland and a fun thing to do. If you're there that day and, just want a little bit of a different thing to do outside the norm when you're coming on a vacation, especially during this period when you can only find stuff like this, that's when you want to kind of book those experiences. So definitely go check that out, and make sure that you're booking before those run out, because last I checked, a lot of them had already run out. That's the way it works with these things. They kind of just go up. We don't know when they're going up, and then all of a sudden they're gone. So it's for me, I almost missed out last year, and this time around, thank God I saw it fast enough and was able to get on there and book it. I don't know if Mondo was able to book it. I tried to get him to do it, but he's so busy, so it might have been booked up already, but I'll definitely be doing it and sharing it with you guys for sure. And then lastly, for this week's episode, just a little bit of armchair imagineering, right? A little bit of speculation and maybe what ifs. We've talked about in the past, on this episode, and also in videos and Speculation Sunday on Mondo's YouTube channel, about a detail that Ken Potrock, our past Disneyland Resort president now, has shared after he debuted the Bayou Country area and Tiana's Bayou Adventure, that changes would be coming much like that to all the other lands inside Disneyland Park. We've harped on this now a few times because it's very telling kind of what the next things are going to be. Now we know, based on the Los Angeles Times article, that the Tomorrowland Autopia is going to be going through an electrification. So going from gas to electricity somehow, whether that's a battery operated car or a continuously electric vehicle, maybe attached to the ground somehow. We'll have to wait and see kind of how they implement it. But we know that's coming in 2026 based on information they shared with an exclusive in LA Times. So that leads us to believe, like, what lands haven't been touched necessarily at Disneyland for this plus up that Ken Potrock has been talking about, saying, just how they made some changes and upgrades to New Orleans Square and to Bayou Country, aka past Critter Country. They want to bring that same plus up and experience to all the other lands in the park. Now, if we think about some of the other lands, right, we have Toontown, which more recently had a full renovation and definitely a plus up when it came to upgrades and things like Goofy's house and Donald's boat and all that kind of stuff that weren't there before. So I don't necessarily think that Toontown's going to be on the upgrade list anytime soon. I want to say we can probably add that to the list of lands that's already been touched. So we have Critter Country, aka Bayou Country now. We have the Toontown, and then we also have New Orleans Square as being touched already. Now, someone brought up a good point in one of our past live shows. Is Adventureland already part of that plus up land in Disneyland, since they kind of more recently got an expansion to their dining area when they took away like more than a half of the gift shop that used to be there in Adventureland to add more indoor dining for Bengal Barbecue, kind of rearranged its queue. And then we had the new Adventureland Treehouse that was under construction for a while, and kind of like the reshaping of the back half of that land. And then the addition of like the Tropical Hideaway, and then different parts of the area that were removed to like make way for strollers, so that strollers no longer had to be parked in the middle of Adventureland anymore. So they did kind of change a lot, and it kind of begs to wonder, like, what is there even left to do in Adventureland to kind of help plus it up? So that was kind of like an unknown. We weren't really sure, like, is Adventureland kind of already considered a plussed up space, or is that still like something Disney has in mind for future changes? We'll have to see, but I kind of like would lean on the side that maybe this one's already done, at least for current times, which would leave us with Frontierland and Tomorrowland and Fantasyland. So kind of what changes would come to those to, plus them up and bring them into a more current time with maybe additional seating. We're seeing some of that already right now in Cars Land, with some of that unused decorative planter space that's in Cars Land across from Luigi's Rollickin' Roadsters being added for a ton more dining space for the Cozy Cone Motel, which has quickly become an area that people love to go to. And there's really just nowhere for people to sit when they get their food and beverage items from those locations. They had a couple tables, but it just never really was enough to accommodate the demand that this location brings. So they've now added a bunch of new dining spaces, and they're continuing even now to add more on top of that over on that side across from the ride. And they're just taking over an old planter that kind of used to be there along the side of the road as you're heading into Avengers Campus. So kind of really not necessarily something that's bringing all that much theming into an element there, and allows them to add some more dining space and make it a more enjoyable experience for guests, who need to find a table to sit down in the shade with their family as they're getting these food items, right? Some people might be inclined to buy a food item more so if they have a place to sit down and do so, rather than if there's like no place to sit, the line's long, they might just make their mind to like not kind of go there. So that's potentially some plus ups that we can see inside the lands. We're also hearing rumors too over at Avengers Campus that the Sanctum, where the Doctor Strange show used to be, might just become a seating area. Some people might, be a little bemoaned to hear that we're losing like a cool interactive show for just additional seating, but that continues to be like a big problem at Avengers Campus. There's nowhere for people to sit. There's no shade. It's kind of a big open space and not a lot for people to sit down and eat. They even don't have enough room a lot of times for guests that have been dining at Pym Test Kitchen and over at the Tasting Lab. They have to take their drinks and food outside across the way from the Guardians of the Galaxy attraction, to experience it on some tables, which more recently have been shrinking in availability. There's not even like maybe 8 tables over there nowadays, and there used to be a heck of a lot more. So it seems like adding more seating in kind of a themed space inside the land might be just what it needs. And in fact, the Shawarma Palace, which is right there, doesn't even have anywhere for guests to sit and eat. They kind of have to get their shawarma and either eat it somewhere else or maybe sit on one of the walls in Avengers Campus along the side by the where you'd normally sit to watch the show, just to eat their shawarma or any other snack they might have gotten. So having like a dedicated seating space for Shawarma's Palace could be a great plus up for that area. But we were kind of like brainstorming different ideas about what we might expect to see over in Frontierland if they did a plus up there. I would definitely expect to see some changes come to the Riverbell Terrace, maybe even a theme being brought to that location, since it currently doesn't really have one and kind of has lost its identity since it went from a transition to quick service to a full service like table service dining restaurant. It kind of lost its identity a little bit. It was like a barbecue for a while, and then it became more like soul food and like they even brought back some Cajun stuff to it, so it's kind of been all over the place. And it would be nice to kind of like dedicate it to a specific theme or specific type of food. I feel like it would help definitely vacationers want to book that location more, knowing kind of what to expect or what kind of food it is, and like not having such a diverse menu that doesn't really hone in on anything. I feel like doesn't draw that many people in to the location. I personally have never been drawn to kind of like dine there, even when it's Phantasmic dining. So I hope they can include this location in the change for Frontierland. Beyond that, we had maybe discussed, what do you guys think if they had like a quick overlay at the Rancho del Zocalo restaurant to be a more Coco themed location? We're going to see Coco themed quick services over in Animal Kingdom in their new Latin America section. And then we also currently already have it in Disneyland Paris in their new expanded areas of the park. So it seems like it'd be a logical step for them to kind of transform this space into Coco anyway. During the holiday season, it already is a Coco themed space, and it does serve Coco themed food during the holidays as well. So that was an idea that we had thrown around, that maybe they include some sort of Coco overlay at the Rancho del Zocalo quick service restaurant. And then beyond that, we know that Walt Disney World has lost its shooting gallery for, I think, a DVC lounge that's coming to the Magic Kingdom. I don't necessarily know that we're going to be having that drastic of a change since there's not really all that much space there to begin with. However, there is definitely room for that shop that's next to it to expand, since Westward Ho is becoming more and more of a popular pin store location. But in addition to that, I could see the shooting gallery remaining since it's so iconic, but maybe getting an overlay like Woody's Roundup, with a little bit more of a child-friendly theme to the shooting gallery than what it currently is. I don't necessarily know that a lot of people would be happy with that, but I think it's maybe a good compromise if Disney wanted to kind of get away from the shooting gallery aspect of it all, but still keep the element or the thematic like experience of it, just with a more Disney kid-friendly vibe. So I could see that becoming a potential for that area. And maybe even changing kind of like the front entrance of Frontierland, the spaces that kind of are unused now, where they have like the old cannon sitting there with like the wagon, and then on the other side they have the pin traders that kind of collect there and do their pin trading, which Disney's kind of tried to address a little bit here and there. But those areas do kind of become pinch points for the transition into Adventureland and the entrance to the gift shop. So there's definitely a chance for them to kind of rework some of that space, maybe make it a little bit more accessible for wheelchairs with the different ramps and multi levels of the shop and stuff like that. So there's a lot of changes that could come to this space. I feel like Frontierland makes the most sense as like the next option where Disney kind of like hones in its changes. I really struggle when I think about like what they could do to Fantasyland beyond what's already there. I don't really see like a lot of changes that could come that haven't already happened, right? We've had enhancements come to Peter Pan. We had a brand new ride version of Snow White. Um, they've done some enhancements on Alice in Wonderland. The only thing I think that hasn't received newer enhancements has been like Pinocchio and Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. So maybe those attractions see some things. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments about like your expectations or maybe thoughts and armchair imagineering ideas for some plus ups and changes on the vein of like something that they've done for Critter Country into Bayou Country. So not like massive changes, but things that can help make it more modernized, more plussed up into a current day Disneyland for Fantasyland. And then, of course, lastly, for Tomorrowland, this one's pretty easy, right? The land itself sits pretty abandoned. There's a lot of stuff there that's not really used that much anymore. Of course, Innoventions building being one of them, Star Wars Launch Bay. It is still being utilized as a DVC lounge space, of course, a paid experience for fireworks at nighttime. And then more importantly for Disney, it's their Imagination Institute, or I think it's the Imagination Institute, their like youth education program that happens basically on all the lower floors of that building. And that's a pretty profitable business for them. So I don't see that kind of going away. But we do have like the Tomorrowlanding gift shop, which is really small and kind of awkward underneath the old people mover rocket rod station. And then, of course, there's that station in and of itself, which for the most part just sits there unused. And the Observatron above it no longer spins or comes to life. The Pizza Planet, it's getting a little dated. The restaurant layout makes absolutely no sense anymore. Ever since the pandemic, they changed it from a like traditional buffet style where you go up and grab your item and then go to the register, to a location now where you order at the register, take your receipt to a counter, and then they bring you your food. I've hated this transition. It's made this restaurant to me completely unenjoyable. I don't even go there anymore because of that experience. It's just terrible. It's slow. I mean, it made sense during the pandemic, right? They don't want people crowding together. They didn't want them touching people's food. But it doesn't make sense for the fact that there's other restaurants that still do this, right? We have Rancho del Zocalo, which still does this in parts of its restaurant. The Boardwalk Pizza and Pasta still functions and operates the way Pizza Planet used to. So it's certainly not something they've completely gone away from. And it just doesn't make sense to me as to why they brought it back to this. There might have been some, mathematics that they had that show that this was more efficient, but I don't really feel that's the case. I feel like every time I've encountered Pizza Planet, there's a line out the door, and you used to be able to just walk in and like get in the queue and grab what it is that you wanted and then take it to the register. Maybe they encountered more instances of shrink, aka theft, where people would just come up and like not pay for their food. That could have been a possibility. But it's just really awkward because the restaurant wasn't made for the way it's laid out now, and so it looks really bad show when you're in there and there's just like counters stuck in the middle of this location, and then all the old display counters are just sitting vacant behind it. It's not a good look. So I hope that when Tomorrowland gets redone, this location also gets redone. It doesn't have to lose its Pizza Planet theme. I think that's a good theme, right? For the Pizza Planet from the Toy Story restaurants is iconic. Maybe they can even bring the Pizza Planet truck outside the location for like photo ops and stuff like that. But I feel like they just need to rework the whole interior space on this to be better, and that could definitely be a part of the change and plus up for Tomorrowland. And in addition to that, of course, we have the Starcade, right, which still has signage to this day as the Starcade, but there is no more Starcade anymore. The upstairs version of the Starcade has been absorbed and permanently added to Space Mountain as additional, really nicely themed queue space for that. And that happened a couple years ago. And then on the bottom floor, it's now mainly just used for private events and after dark events. So it typically becomes the hub for merchandise and check-in for after dark events inside Disneyland. And then in addition to that, it's been used for like Magic Key, like free giveaway location and like photo ops and stuff. So it's definitely a great space to keep handy for like flexible uses like that, and they could definitely do that. But maybe remove the Starcade signage and maybe even rework the space a little bit better to be utilized for those after dark events, or just flexible spaces as needed, even if it means extended queue for something like Space Mountain when if and when it ever needs it. Just let it be a space that can be used for anything, I think. So maybe reworking it to better accommodate that. And then, of course, there's also that rumor about Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters turning into Wreck-It Ralph. This is something that we're seeing happen at Tokyo Disney. We're seeing the Buzz Lightyear attraction there transform into a Wreck-It Ralph theme attraction using the existing ride system. So it's something that maybe we could see. People are saying maybe they bring this here because they kind of do it twice in one go. Disney loves to do that with ride overlays at multiple locations, which obviously is the case since they have a Buzz Lightyear there as well too. And then lastly, in Tomorrowland, people were saying that there was rumors of a potential overlay at Space Mountain themed to WALL-E, and that could be a fun experience too. The current one does see an overlay throughout the year when it does become Hyperspace Mountain during Star Wars Season of the Force. So as long as they could maintain like a Star Wars overlay at some point for these specific After Dark events and/or during the Season of the Force times, I think it'd be a good overlay. And I think people would be open to like a WALL-E experience at Space Mountain, at least in my opinion. Um, as far as other areas, I don't necessarily know that this level of a plus up or renovation to Tomorrowland would include something as major as the People Mover, but maybe, I don't truly know. It's all speculative, right? It's just for fun. So maybe that's the case. Maybe we do see something there when they decide to do it. But I would imagine we just, for me, I kind of just envision it and picture it as changing the color and paint in Tomorrowland, addressing some of the planters, some of the decor, making sure the entrance is renovated and redone like they wanted it to with the construction wall that's been there since 2019. And just all those other small overlays we talked about for like Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters, maybe Space Mountain and the Pizza Planet, maybe the Tomorrow Landing. So there's a lot of things that they could do on a smaller scale that don't necessarily require like a major land redo. Because I don't necessarily know that that's on the horizon anytime soon for Tomorrowland, when we have things like the expansion at Avengers Campus and then a brand new Avatar themed land coming. I feel like those are going to take priority when it comes to like major products. But that wraps up this week's episode of the 5571 podcast. We're going to be back next week on this podcast with a guest host. So we'll have a guest host with some back and forward interviewing and stuff like that. So something to look forward to next week. We got a guest list roster for the next few. So it's going to be fun to kind of get back to that cadence. It's why I switched to this new software, right? So that I can have guests more easier on the show to kind of bring some more interesting perspectives on here. So I hope you enjoy that next week. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast, whether you're watching me talk on YouTube or you're listening to me on your podcast platform. Just make sure you're subscribed in any way. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel, the 5571, which is where this podcast lives. And then you can also enjoy not only the podcast, but some videos that I put out, some vlogs and things like that as well too. And if you'd like to follow me on social media, you can do so. Just Ask Danny on all platforms. Just search for that. I'm sure you'll be able to find it. And if you'd like to email me, you could do so too. Any collaborations, questions, whatever it is you'd like to do, you can email danny@justaskdanny.com. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. And thanks for watching if you're also watching. And we'll see you next week. Thanks.